putting your kid in a seatbelt. The head of the CDC's food poisoning division famously responded to this blame the victim attitude coming from the meat industry. She asked, is it reasonable that if a consumer undercooks a hamburger, their 3-year-old dies? Is that reasonable? Not to worry, the meat industry's on it. They just got FDA approval for a bacteria-eating virus they can spray on the meat. Now, the industry's a little concerned about consumer acceptance of these so-called bacteriophages. May present some of a challenge to the food industry, so of course they decided not to label it or anything. But if they think that's going to be a challenge, check out their other bright idea. The effect of extracted housefly pupa. This is a sciencey way of saying they want to smear a maggot mixture on the meat. Now, it's a low cost and simple. Think about it. Look, maggots thrive off of rotting flesh. However, there have been no reports of maggots having any serious diseases. So, hey, they must be filled with some kind of antibacteria something, right? Have you ever seen a maggot sneeze? I didn't think so. So, let's take some maggots, grow them 3 days old, wash them off, towel them off, a little Vitamix action here, and voila! Safer meats. We talked about kidney failure. What about liver failure? We've known for decades you can treat liver failure with a plant-based diet, significantly reducing the toxins that would otherwise build up eating meat without a fully functional liver to detoxify your blood. But one does have to admit there are some people eating plant-based diets with worsening liver function. They're called alcoholics, living off of potatoes and barley and grapes. I mean, strictly plant-based, but not doing so good. We're not sure exactly what. Next on the list is high blood pressure. 78 million Americans affected. That's 1 in 3 American adults. And as we get older, our pressures get higher and higher, such that by age 60, most of us have hypertension. So wait a second. If most of us get high blood pressure when we get older, maybe it's less a disease and more just an inevitable consequence of aging. No. We've known since the 1920s that high blood pressure need not occur. They measured the blood pressures of 1,000 people living in rural Kenya who ate the following diet: grains, beans, vegetables, fruit, and greens. Our blood pressures go up as we age. Their blood pressures go down. And the lower the better. We now know that even people with blood pressures under 120/80 can benefit from blood pressure reduction. If you went to your doctor with a blood pressure of 120/80, you'd get a gold star. But now there's evidence even people under 20/80 may benefit from blood pressure reduction. So the ideal blood pressure, the no benefit from reducing it further blood pressure, 110/70. 110. Is it even possible to get down to pressures under 110/70? It's not just possible, it's normal for those eating healthy enough diet. 2 years at this rural Kenyan hospital, 1,800 patients were admitted. How many cases of high blood pressure did they find? 0. Wow, they must have had low rates of heart disease, right? No, they had no rates of heart disease. Not a single case of atherosclerosis, our #1 killer, was found. Rural China, same thing. About 110/70 their entire lives. 70-year-old, same average blood pressure as 16-year-old. Now, African diet, Asian diet, vastly different diets, but what they shared in common was that they were plant-based day to day with meat only eaten on special occasions. So wait a second, why do we think it's the plant-based nature of their diets that was so protected? Because in the Western world, according to the American Heart Association, the only folks getting it down that low were these strict vegetarians coming in with an average blood pressure of about 110/65. You look at the largest study of plant-based eaters in history, looking at 89,000 Californians, comparing non-vegetarians. This is an Adventist study, so even the non-vegetarians were healthier than the average population, eat lots of fruits and vegetables, didn't eat a lot of meat, don't smoke. It's a very healthy population. Compared to healthy meat eaters, they looked at semi-vegetarians, or like flexitarians, people who eat meat really more on a weekly basis, like once a week rather than on a daily basis, versus those that don't eat any meat except fish, compared to those who don't eat any meat at all, compared to those who eat no meat, eggs, or dairy. And what they found is this stepwise drop in risk the more and more plant-based their diet got. Same thing with diabetes, same thing with obesity. So sure, we can throw the vast majority of our risk out the window eating strictly plant-based, but what I want to emphasize about this slide is it's not all or nothing. It's not black or white. Any movement we can make along this spectrum towards eating healthier can accrue significant health benefits. Now, experimentally, you can show this for high blood pressure. You take vegetarians, you give them meat, pay them enough to eat it, and their blood pressures go up. Or you take people who already eat meat and remove meat from their diet, and their blood pressures go down within 7 days. This is after most of them had to stop or reduce their blood pressure medications. They had to, because if you treat the cause of their blood pressure, right? If they don't have high blood pressure anymore, you can't be on blood pressure drugs with normal blood pressure, you drop too low, right? So lower blood pressures on fewer drugs. That's the power of plants. So, this American Heart Association recommending no meat diet. Now they recommend a low meat diet, the so-called DASH diet. And I said, wait a second. When the DASH diet was being created, I mean, were they just not aware of this landmark research done by Harvard's Frank Sachs? No, they were aware. The chair of the design committee that came up with the DASH diet was Frank Sachs. See, the DASH diet was created with the #1 goal of capturing the blood pressure lowering benefits of a vegetarian diet, yet contain enough animal products to make it palatable to the general population. They didn't think the public could handle the truth. Now you can kind of see what they're thinking. Look, just like drugs never work unless you actually take them, diets never work unless you actually eat them. So they're like, oh look, we can't tell everyone to eat strictly a vegetarian, no one's got to do that. So if we soft pedal the message, come up with some kind of compromise diet on a population scale, maybe we'll do more good. Okay. Tell that to the 1,000 US families a day that lose a family member to high blood pressure. Maybe it's time to start telling the American public the truth. Killer number 14 is Parkinson's disease. Does a plant-based diet reduce the risk of Parkinson's disease? Well, we know that most studies looking at dairy product consumption have found a link between dairy products and development of Parkinson's disease. They say, wait a second, why? Well, we think it's because of neurotoxic chemicals that are found in the milk supply. So high levels of, for example, organochlorine pesticides found not only in milk, but also in the brains of victims of Parkinson's on autopsy. Talking about pollutants like tetrahydroisoquinoline, which is actually what scientists use to try to create Parkinson's in primates in a laboratory setting, found mostly in cheese. And so there's been calls in the dairy industry to do toxin screenings of their own milk. Good luck with that. Of course, you could just not drink it, but then what would happen to your bones? That's a marketing play. If you look at the actual science, milk does not appear to protect against hip fractures, whether you're drinking as an adult, whether you're drinking as a teen, doesn't matter, doesn't work. In fact, may actually increase fracture risk, which may explain why countries with the highest milk consumption have the highest hip fracture rate. So Swedish researchers decided to put it to the test. 100,000 men and women followed for years, and what did they find? They found that milk-drinking women had significantly higher rates of death. more heart disease, significantly more cancer for each daily glass of milk. Those women that drank 3 glasses of milk a day had nearly twice the risk of dying prematurely within the study. And they had more bone and hip fractures too. More milk, more fractures. And milk drinking men also had higher rates of death. Yet for some reason you don't see milk ads like this. I'm not exactly sure why. And finally, killer number 15, which is aspiration pneumonia, which is caused by swallowing difficulties due to a stroke or Parkinson's or Alzheimer's, things we've already talked about. So here we go. These are the 15 leading killers in the United States, and plant-based diet can help prevent nearly all of them. Can be used to treat more than half of them and even reverse the course of disease, and some of them, including in some cases, are top 3 killers. Now look, there are certain drugs that can help too. There's cholesterol-lowering statin drugs for the heart, for diabetes, there's insulin injections, various sugar pills. It usually takes a couple different classes of high blood pressure medications to force people's blood pressure down, but it's the same diet that does it all. It's not like there's some heart-healthy diet that's somehow different from a brain-healthy diet. No, a liver-healthy diet is a kidney-healthy diet, is a whole-body healthy diet. One diet to rule them all. And what about drug side effects? I'm not talking about a little rash here. Prescription drugs kill more than 100,000 Americans every year. Wait a second, 106,000 Americans every year? That means that the actual 6th leading cause of death in the United States is doctor. The 6th leading killer is me. Thankfully, I can be prevented with a plant-based diet. No, seriously, compared to 15,000 American vegetarians, those that eat meat, about twice the odds of being on aspirin, sleeping pills, tranquilizers, antacids, painkillers, blood pressure medications, laxatives, of course, as well as insulin. So plant-based diets are great for people that don't like taking drugs, for people that don't like paying for drugs, and people that don't like risking drug side effects. Want to solve the healthcare crisis? Cleveland? I've got a suggestion. There's only one diet ever been proven to reverse heart disease in the majority of patients. That's a plant-based diet. So anytime anyone tries to sell you on some new diet they heard about, do me a favor, ask them a simple question. Wait a second, has this diet been proven to reverse heart disease? You know the number one reason me and all my loved ones will die? If the answer is no, why'd you even consider it? If that's all a plant-based diet could do, reverse the number one killer of men and women, shouldn't that be kind of the default diet to prove it otherwise? And the fact that it can also be useful preventing, treating, and arresting other leading killers like type 2 diabetes and hypertension would seem to make the case for plant-based eating simply overwhelmed. Most deaths in the United States are preventable and related to nutrition. According to the largest study of risk factors ever published, funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the number one cause of death in the United States, it's our diet. The number one cause of disability in the United States, our diet. Bumping tobacco smoking to number 2, cigarettes now only kill about 500,000 Americans every year, whereas our diet kills hundreds of thousands more. So if our diet is the number one cause of death and disability, well, then obviously it's the number one thing taught in medical school, right? It's the number one thing that your doctor talks to you about, right? So wait a second, how can there be such a disconnect between the science and kind of the current practice of medicine? Well, to answer that question, let's do a thought experiment. Imagine yourself a smoker back in the 1950s. Now, Back in the 1950s, the average per capita cigarette consumption was 4,000 cigarettes a year, meaning the average person walking around smoked half pack a day, on average. The media was telling people to smoke. Famous athletes agreed. Even Santa Claus wanted you to smoke. I mean, look, you want to keep fit and stay slim, so make sure to smoke and eat lots of hot dogs to stay trim, and eat lots of sugar to stay slim and trim. A lot better than that apple there. I mean, sheesh, right? Although apples do connote goodness and freshness, reads one internal tobacco industry memo, which brings up many possibilities for a youth-oriented cigarette. They want to make apple-flavored cigarettes for kids. For digestion's sake, you smoke. I mean, no curative powers claimed by Philip Morris, but hey, better safe than sorry, and smoke. Blow in her face and she'll follow you anyway. No woman ever says no. They're so round, so firm, so fully packed. After all, John Wayne smoked them until he got lung cancer and died. Now back then, even the paleo folks were smoking. And so were the doctors. Now this is not to say there wasn't controversy within the medical profession. Sure, some doctors smoked Camels, but others preferred Lucky, so there was a little disagreement going on. The leader of the U.S. Senate agreed. Who wouldn't want to give their throat a vacation? Not a single case of throat irritation. How could there be when cigarettes are just as pure as the water you drink? Maybe in Flint, Michigan. But don't worry, if you do get irritated, no problem. Your doctor can write you a prescription for cigarettes. This is an ad in the Journal of the American Medical Association. So when the AMA was saying that smoking on balance is actually good for you, when the American Medical Association is saying that, where could you turn if you just wanted the facts? What's the new data advanced by science? Well, she was too tired for fun, and then she smoked a Camel. Babe Ruth spoke of proof positive medical science, that is, when he still could speak, before he died of throat cancer. Now, by some miracle back then, there was some smokingfacts.org website that could deliver the science directly, bypassing commercially corruptible institutional filters. You would have become aware of studies like this. This is an Adventist study published out of California in 1958 showing that non-smokers had at least 90% less lung cancer than smokers. This isn't the first. Well, the famed surgeon Michael DeBakey was asked why his studies back in the 30s linking smoking and lung cancer were simply ignored. He had to remind people what it was like back then. We were a smoking society. It was everywhere. It was in the movies. It was on airplanes. Medical meetings were one heavy haze of smoke. Smoking was, in a word, normal. So, back to our thought experiment. If you're a smoker in the 50s in the know, what do? I mean, with access to the science, you realize the best available balance of evidence suggests your smoking habit, not so good for you. So do you change, or do you wait? Now, if you wait until your doctor tells you, between puffs, to quit, you'd have cancer by then. If you wait until the powers that be officially recognize it, like the Surgeon General did in the subsequent decade, you'd be dead by then. It took more than 7,000 studies and the deaths of countless smokers before the first Surgeon General's report against smoking came out. You'd think maybe after the first 6,000 studies, it could give you a little heads up or something. Powerful industry. One wonders how many people are currently suffering needlessly from dietary diseases. Maybe we should have stopped smoking after the 700th study like this. So as a smoker in the 50s, on one hand, you had all of society, the government, the medical profession itself telling you to smoke. And on the other, all you had was the science. If you're even aware of studies like this. All right, let's fast forward 55 years. You know, there's a new Adventist study out of California warning Americans about something else they may be putting in their mouth. And of course, it's not just one study. Recent review put all the studies together, found that death from all causes put together, many of our dreaded diseases, strokes, cancer, etc., significantly lower among those eating more plant-based diet. So instead of someone going along with America's smoking habits in the 50s, imagine you or someone you know, someone you love, going along with America's eating habits today. What do? I mean, with access to the science, you realize the best available balance that I would suggest your eating habit, not so good for you. So do you change or do you wait? I mean, if you wait until your doctor tells you between bites to change, it'll be too late. In fact, even after the Surgeon General's report came out, the AMA still dragged their feet. The doctors always the last ones on board. In fact, the American Medical Association even came out refusing to endorse the Surgeon General's report. Why might that be? Perhaps it's because they got a $10 million check from the tobacco industry? Maybe. Okay, so we see why the AMA is sucking up to the tobacco industry, but wait a second. Why weren't more individual doctors speaking out? Well, there were a few. Gallant souls ahead of their time speaking up against industries killing millions, but why not more? Maybe it's because the majority of physicians themselves smoke cigarettes. Just like the majority of physicians today continue to eat foods that are contributing to our epidemics of dietary disease. What was the AMA's rallying cry back then? Everything in moderation. Extensive scientific studies have proven smoking in moderation, oh, that's fine. Sound familiar? The food industry uses the same tobacco industry tactics, twisting the science, misinformation. The same scientists for are paid to downplay the risks of secondhand smoke and toxic chemicals are the same paid for by the National Confectioners Association to downplay the risks of candy, and the same paid for by the meat industry to downplay the risks of meat. Animal foods and processed foods may be contributing to 14 million deaths every year. So for those of you here, part of the evidence-based nutrition movement, you are involved in a movement that has 14 million lives in the balance every year. Maybe plant-based diet should be considered kind of the nutritional equivalent of stopping smoking. But how many more people have to die before the CDC says, don't wait for open heart surgery to start eating healthier as well? Until the system changes, we need to take personal responsibility for ourselves, for our families. We can't wait until society catches up to the science again, because it's a matter of life and death. When Dr. Kim Williams became president of the American College of Cardiology last year, he was asked why he himself follows the same diet he recommends to all his patients, plant-based diet. I don't mind dying, Dr. Williams replied. I just don't want it to be my own fault. Thank you so much.